I clearly remember the day I decided to leave my hometown. It was a crisp autumn morning, with the earthy scent of fallen leaves hanging in the air. I packed up everything I held dear into my old pickup truck, determined to start fresh, far away from the painful memories that had held me captive. Leaving wasn't an easy decision, but it was necessary. Betrayal and deceit had destroyed everything I'd built, and the only way I could heal was by distancing myself from the people who had hurt me. After several hours on the road, I stumbled upon a quiet, charming little town that seemed like the perfect place for a new beginning. The locals were warm and friendly, and the slow-paced life felt like exactly what I needed. I found a rundown gas station and garage that had been sitting on the market for years. It was in need of a lot of work, but I saw its potential immediately. I made a low offer, not expecting much, but surprisingly, it was accepted. That property became the foundation for the business and life I was about to rebuild. I moved forward with plans to start a new chapter. One Saturday afternoon, after a long week of work, I found myself sitting at the local tavern, savoring the peace and solitude. This bar quickly became my sanctuary, a place where I could escape the noise and think clearly. Soon after settling in, I bought the gas station and repair shop for a steal. The previous owner was eager to sell, and the place had been on the market for 2 years. The potential was clear, and it felt like the right move to help me leave my past behind. The first thing I did was build a retail store facing the gas station to supply the town. It became a lifeline after the local grocery store closed at 7 p.m. I even moved the gas pumps so they were visible from the store, allowing for plenty of parking for customers. My store quickly became a popular spot, especially from 7 p.m. to midnight, providing everything from snacks to convenience items. The garage at the back operated from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. 5 days a week, with special projects handled on Saturdays. Though some regulars at the bar initially were upset that I began selling liquor, the decision proved successful, providing a good income and much-needed jobs for the community. The business thrived after restructuring the store and internal merchandising. The woman I hired helped quickly turn things around. Within no time, we had to double the staff to meet the high demand, particularly on weekends. Friday and Saturday nights saw a steady flow of bar patrons buying junk food, and Sunday nights brought in plenty of cold beer sales. I had never imagined that running a gas station and repair shop would lead to such a thriving business. One evening, as I sipped a double shot of Jack Daniels with ice water and lemon, I felt a small sense of accomplishment. I had just finished replacing the steering column in an old family heirloom truck, a truck that had been passed down through generations. The part had taken me months to track down and fabricate, but it was worth it. It was 4 to 7 p.m., the best time at the bar, and the place was filled with regulars who had finished dinner and were ready to unwind. Farmers brought their daughters in for after-work fun, and I had made plenty of connections in the 6 years I'd lived there. The locals looked out for one another, and I had gained a reputation as someone they could trust. It was then that I saw them walk into the bar, and I wished I hadn't. The woman was my ex's twin sister, and the young man with her was once my son. It was like a punch to the gut. Memories I hadn't wanted to face came rushing back. I realized then that you can't see evil when you live with it. The boy had grown up, and now he looked more like his biological father than me. It was clear that the truth would always come out. They showed the bartender a picture and then left, and I was grateful for my unkempt hair and beard. It made me look different, and thankfully, no one seemed to recognize me. About half an hour later, the bartender came over to my table. What did they want? I asked. They wanted to give you a message. They heard a rumor you lived here and came to check it out, Tom replied. They said a woman named Willa is dying of cancer and wants to make peace. I asked for their names, pretending not to recognize them. Tom answered, from their body language, I'd say they're partly honest, but hiding something big. I nodded, knowing my ex-wife and her twin sister had always been deceptive. They'd mastered the art of appearing genuine while betraying me. I thought back to nearly 7 years ago when I left, promising never to return for at least 7 years. They had laughed at me then, thinking I was just mad, but they learned the hard way. They never saw or heard from me directly again. I had discovered a devastating truth about our youngest child being my brother-in-law's son. That revelation had been the spark that started my journey to this moment. It wasn't just a betrayal. It was the realization that I had been living a lie for years. After I left, I found out that there was a new insurance policy on me, with double indemnity for accidental death, totaling $4 million. If I passed away, Willa and her family would be set. A wise old woman had told me to get out while I still could. So, when I left for work that morning, they had no idea that my truck was already packed with everything I wanted for my 16-year marriage. I drove off without looking back, heading 2 states away. Part of this was my fault. When Willa got pregnant at 16 and I was 18, my family convinced me to marry her. We had 2 more kids, and they thought it was funny. Willa told our daughters, "Your father will come back once he cools off. He just needs to regain his sense of humor." A few hours later, a sheriff's car arrived at the house. Willa greeted him at the door. "Are you Mrs. Willa Rhine?" he asked. When she said yes, he handed her the envelope and said, "You've just been served." She laughed, thinking it was a joke, but when she opened the envelope, she realized I had dissolved our marriage without hesitation. The Grand Dame had always been full of surprises, and now my lawyer had listed all our assets, liabilities, and even a DNA report showing the affair that lasted a year. The divorce petition also included receipts and photos from their hotel meetings. Along with it was a letter, revealing I was suing her husband for child support, infidelity, and defamation. Their laughter stopped. The joke wasn't on me anymore. I had the last laugh. They thought I was only good for making money, that everything I touched turned to gold. Willa and the kids were spoiled and never wanted for anything. But that all changed when Willa found out I had sold 3 of our businesses, paid off all our debts, and sold our 2 apartment buildings for a profit. I canceled all the credit cards, removed my name from the bank accounts, and signed over my half of the house to her. I took half our worth in cash, reducing our cash flow from $10,000 a month to 0. Willa's sister learned the hard way what it meant to mess with me. My lawyer froze their assets before they could even get the subpoena, leaving them with nothing. After the divorce, my lawyer reimbursed Willa for a quarter of their losses. When she asked why, he simply replied, "For him, it was never about the money. It was about principle. He hopes this gives you a chance to start over and learn from your mistakes." Willa refused to agree to the divorce without speaking to me, which left us legally separated but not divorced. I had no desire to talk to someone who had lied to me for years. Willa had to work for the first time in her life, learning the hard way that money doesn't last long without income. I had my lawyer forward important mail to a rented FedEx mailbox, which was then sent to my work address weekly. I knew Willa and her sister loved to manipulate and plot revenge, and I knew they would eventually try to get back at me. It wasn't a matter of if, but when. Their family didn't believe in letting things be, and my absence upset them. The longer this went on, the worse the payback would be. They wouldn't let it go easily. I thought I had succeeded in escaping, but with Tammy's sudden appearance, I realized their game wasn't over. I finished my drink, walked out the back door to avoid any unwanted attention, and crossed the empty lot behind the house. I walked around the block to my truck and was unlocking the door when a man approached. "You're a hard man to find, Mr. Arthur Seth Rasim," he said. I replied, "No doubt. How do you know that?" He responded, "My name is Peter Edwards. Your oldest daughter Connie is my wife." I couldn't help but smirk. That could be a blessing or a curse if she acts like her mother. "So why are you here?" "I came looking for you," he said. "Some things need to be settled." I was immediately on guard. "What divorce agreement?" I asked, seeing he was holding something. Peter followed me to my house, and we drove through town to a long driveway leading to my farmhouse. Once inside, I showed him the divorce papers and let him make copies. Peter was pleasant enough, young, confident, and seemingly educated. But I couldn't help but wonder if he was part of Willa and Tammy's scheme. He used my Wi-Fi to download files onto his laptop. I didn't tell him that I didn't actually live there. I had built the place for Willa, hoping she would eventually leave her old home. As he worked, Peter asked for a copy of the sheriff's report that Willa had signed when she was served with the summons. He also printed a damaging letter from Willa's attorney acknowledging the agreed property division, but refusing to finalize the divorce without a meeting with me. I knew they were still planning something. I could see the realization dawning on Peter as he processed the new information. My paperwork was contradicting what he thought he knew. "Do you think Connie knows?" he asked. I didn't answer right away. That's something you'll have to find out, I replied, knowing the truth was already unraveling in front of him. Peter paused and then asked, Is Willa really dying of cancer? I had to laugh a little bitterly at that question. Who told you that? I asked. Tammy and Seth told a bartender that today, he replied. But I know Willa is fine. She's in a common-law marriage with her former lawyer and is expecting his second child. Peter shook his head in disbelief. She's the one who asked me to find you to start the divorce, claiming it's necessary so she can remarry. Peter called his wife and put her on speakerphone so I could hear the conversation. Connie, did you know your mother lied about the divorce not being finalized? Peter asked. What are you talking about? Connie replied, clearly confused. Mom told us Dad abandoned us and cleaned out whatever was left before leaving town. If it wasn't for our stepfather, we wouldn't have survived. Peter calmly continued, I'm sending you the legal file. Read it and contact me as soon as possible. While they talked, I opened 2 bottles of Budweiser and placed one in front of Peter. I asked, Why didn't you tell my daughter you found me? Peter replied, Connie and I have only been married for 2 years, and we just had a son 3 months ago. For now, I'm not going to tell anyone I found you. He showed me his badge, confirming he was a police officer for the Paradise Police Department. After a quick check on my laptop, I confirmed his credentials were real. The accident report from a few months ago led me to you, Peter explained. Connie wrote a report on your disappearance, which was forwarded to the wanted list. The insurance company notified me of the ruling in your favor. Then why didn't you tell Connie you found me? I asked again. Peter paused before responding. After reviewing your file, it became clear something else might be going on, he said. I had to ask, what happened to the $250,000 cash Willa was supposed to get, along with the house deed? Why are they all lying about what really happened? Sounds like I've been fed lies too, Peter replied as his phone rang. It's my wife, he said, putting the call on speakerphone. Hi, honey, Connie said. Where did you get all this from? Is it true we've been lied to for years? Seth doesn't know his origins, and neither do I. My sister Karen will be shocked. Mom chastised her for defending Dad, and they don't speak anymore. This story contradicts everything we've been told. Mom and Annie gave Dad no choice. They've been manipulating his life for years. What bothers me is that the divorce isn't finalized because Mom won't sign it. What's really going on? It's true, Peter responded. I got the information from your father's lawyer's widow. I had to go out of state to find her. Her husband kept duplicates of all his records. From the paperwork, it looks like your mother was served with a divorce petition the same day he left. Peter added, I wrote a note for Connie to talk to her great-aunt Josie if she's still alive. Peter nodded as Connie responded, Pete, it's crucial to find my father now. He deserves to be free of Mom and her schemes, at least to finalize the divorce. What happened to the money she got? Why did she have to sell the house if it was hers? The more I look into this, the more I wonder what's really going on and why she planned to sue him for desertion once she found him. Peter agreed. Ask my sister to watch our son a bit longer. You talk to Aunt Josie about what we found. Maybe she'll open up. He added, This must stay between us for now. It looks like there may be serious fraud. Why has your mother been slandering your father for years? I'll need to talk to the district attorney. The $250,000 cash disappeared once it reached your father's lawyer. Don't tell your sister yet. If the DA investigates, it's best no one else knows. I went to the kitchen to grab some snacks, giving Peter privacy as he finished his call. When I returned, he asked, Why do you want Connie to talk to Aunt Josie? Aunt Josie gathered all the information about Willa and George's affair, I replied. She never married, but she watched over the family like a mother raising her only daughter. Being a single mom changed her perspective. She thought Tammy and Willa conspired and used George and me, but their ultimate goal is unclear. If it's true, why? I said, Aunt Josie's granddaughter, Jod, wants her to move in with her, but Josie insists on waiting until the truth comes out. Jod visits with her 2 sons, but she lives a very withdrawn life. Socializing with Willa and Tammy takes a toll on everyone. They've used people most of their lives. Peter asked, Do you want to ask me about your children before I leave? I shook my head, Not yet. I knew Peter was genuinely who he claimed to be, but a small part of me still wondered if this was another game from Willa and Tammy. I decided to be cautious and asked Peter to look into the sudden passing of my lawyer, wondering if they were planning to sue me. When Peter's face went pale, I saw the realization hit him. He was learning how deep the deceit ran. He agreed to keep in touch, and we exchanged numbers. I walked him to the door, shook his hand, and said goodbye. After he left, I cleaned up the apartment, locked up, and took the long way home, making sure I wasn't being followed. I needed time to think. My life had been improving since I put the past behind me, but now it felt like everything might be crashing down. Willa and Tammy would stop at nothing for money. I had to prepare for whatever was coming next, knowing they would try to play their tricks again. As soon as I walked through the door, my two little kids, just 3 and 4 years old, ran to me and grabbed my legs. I picked them up, feeling blessed to have them in my life. Just like their mother, they were the apples of my eye. Dinner's almost ready. Jod called out from the kitchen. She was my wife now, and we had built a beautiful, peaceful life together. I felt a sense of comfort I hadn't known in years. Over dinner, I told her about my day. It felt good to talk about something other than the whirlwind of the past few months. Closing the store had been a turning point. I couldn't have imagined my life turning out like this when I left Paradise nearly 7 years ago. I had promised my grandmother, Josie, that I would keep in touch, and I did. I called her every Sunday, and it was about 1.25 years ago when she reached out for help. Her granddaughter, Jod, needed to escape a failed marriage and find a safe place to start over. Jod was 10 years younger than me, and I didn't know much about her at first, but I owed Josie everything, so I was glad to help. It took a week to find a small 2-bedroom apartment for her and partially furnish it. When I arrived to pick her up, she had quit her job, emptied her bank accounts, and packed her bags. Her husband was about to enlist in the army after his last training exercise. That evening, around 8, I arrived with a rented U-Haul truck, and with the help of a few friends and neighbors, we loaded everything she wanted into the truck. In under 4 hours, we were on the road, leaving her old life behind. As we drove back, Jod and I started to get to know each other better. Late that night, she received a call from her grandmother, Josie. "You could have warned me," Jod said with a laugh. "He's a wild bushman who might look half decent if he cleaned up." I smiled at her joke, but it wasn't all lighthearted. Josie had contacted Jod's attorney to have all her legal documents sent to my FedEx box. Josie had been worried about Jod's ex-husband causing trouble, so I took steps to protect her. Jod eventually took over managing my store and quickly proved to be a capable and hardworking manager. She made significant improvements, prioritizing customer needs and organizing the staff well. Her personality was magnetic, attracting many new clients. She became well-loved by everyone who met her. Meanwhile, her ex-husband had been dishonorably discharged and moved back to my old hometown, thinking Jod would still be there. For safety, Jod wore a diamond ring, which helped her adjust to her new life and helped divert unwanted attention. When asked about the ring, she just smiled and said, "I'm sure you'll figure it out," sparking rumors that she was my future mail-order bride. Our relationship grew stronger with time. Everyone assumed we were a couple, and Josie kept us updated on events back home. We became more curious when we learned Jod's ex was friendly with Tammy. The day Jod's divorce was finalized, our relationship took a deeper turn. We celebrated with friends at the local bar, and I shared my first kiss with her during a slow dance under the dim lights. 6 months later, we moved in together. The kids were playing in the bathtub while I decided to shave off my beard and mustache, leaving just stubble. The kids giggled with delight as I soaped their faces and mine with the bowl and brush Jod had bought me for Christmas. Afterward, I was amazed at how different I looked. Jod walked in, surprised to see the kids laughing as I finished shaving. "It looks like Daddy would look like you with a clean face," she teased. "Should I cut his hair too?" she added, and the kids eagerly nodded. Jod ended up cutting my hair herself, and by the time she finished, I hardly recognized myself in the mirror. I told her she did a great job, and she sent me to shower while she cleaned up. During that time, Josie called to inform Jod that Connie had just left. Jod believed her grandmother was ready to confront the family and finally set things straight. Connie had learned that my 3 children were supposed to receive $600 a month each from annuities, and Jod's curiosity and concern only grew stronger. I had set up child support for the kids, but it seemed like they hadn't received any of it yet. The next week, I was met with jokes from everyone about my new look. People were even asking Jod if she had to blackmail me into becoming a normal part of society. She responded with humor, saying that I promised to bathe at least 3 times a week, which some got the joke, while others didn't. It was interesting to watch how people acted when they thought they were superior. Things took a turn when Bird of Paradise informed me that I would be sued in civil court for child abandonment, desertion, and back child support. Jod and I found it somewhat amusing at first, thinking that a judgment would only lead to a collection service trying to find me. The mailman, though, also found the news a bit funny, delivering a surprising update. Peter, my attorney, estimated that Willa and Tammy had stolen over $48,000 from each of our children. As we re-examined the circumstances surrounding my former attorney's sudden passing, we realized that this case had turned into an open criminal investigation. Jod's ex-husband had become a person of interest. If our findings were true, Willa and Tammy could face 7 to 10 years in prison, and Willa's former lawyer, now her common-law husband, could be disbarred. The lawyer I hired for me would be paid by Willa and Tammy, and I had to remain hidden to help build a stronger case. We had a few weeks of relative peace before Josie called on Sunday night to inform us that paperwork would be filed the next day. She emailed me everything she had collected over the past 7 years, including notarized statements, videotaped conversations, and names of attorneys for a countersuit. One thing caught my attention: a $2 million accidental death insurance policy explaining some missing money. Jod discovered the policy had been purchased 6 months before I left. We spent half the night forwarding information to the DA, certain that it was a setup to lure me back. The next morning, Jod called the recommended attorneys, picked one, and sent them everything, including the retainer. As soon as Willa's team filed the lawsuit, we planned to serve them before receiving it. Friday morning, Jod informed me that Josie was on her way with guests. Having left Thursday night and stayed overnight at a hotel, this meant things were heating up. Jod and I decided to close the store on Saturday for a long weekend with family. Peter was riding with Connie and their son. Connie only knew they were visiting Jod, and at around 7 p.m., we saw a Ford Explorer and Escape pull up in the driveway. 4 adults got out, and Jod noticed my concern. She took my hand, and I reassured her that my truck was hidden in the garage, so no one would know I was there. "Who's that with Josie?" Jod asked. "That's Peter, his wife Connie holding their baby, and Karen, my second oldest daughter," I replied. "Are you ready for this?" I asked. "As ready as I'll ever be," she answered. We all greeted our guests, and when Karen saw me, she burst into tears. I handed my son to his great-grandmother and hugged Karen tightly. My daughters had grown into beautiful young women, and seeing them all together was unforgettable. "Good to see you again, Peter," I said, shaking his hand after introductions. Jod served a huge dinner: beef shoulder, mashed potatoes, gravy, scones, Yorkshire pudding, string beans, and hot apple pie for dessert. After the kids settled down, we began discussing everything. "First of all, Art, is it okay if I call you Dad?" Peter asked. I nodded. "Then, Dad," Peter continued, "the DA believes Jod's ex's car was involved in your lawyer's accident. We're doing a paint comparison with the current owner's car. If it matches, he'll be charged with manslaughter." Peter also explained the fire that destroyed my office, which was being treated as arson. Video footage placed the ex-husband in the background, and they thought that since Willa and her attorneys sealed the divorce papers, there were no documents to prove what happened. "They filed a lawsuit against you this week," Peter added. Jod looked at me and burst into tears. "I always thought you were overprotective when you moved me here," she said. "But now I see you weren't. I thought your questions to my grandmother were excessive, but now I realize you needed to understand who we were dealing with before making a plan." Josie said, "Willa and Tammy received your lawsuit on Thursday. They must have realized I was communicating with you. We feared they'd start tormenting me, so we came here quickly. Grandma, we got your house ready." Josie added, "It's finished, so you just need clothes. I brought most of it in the car." Josie also gave Connie power of attorney to sell the house and furniture. "It's time to leave paradise," I said. "I'll drive back with Peter and Connie and rent a truck to haul everything out." It's time to see if our suspicions are correct. Peter's face turned white as he realized the full truth. They were planning your death, Dad, Connie said, wide-eyed. You knew it before you left town, didn't you? I replied with a broad smile. I had a good idea at the time, but even my lawyer didn't believe me. I took satisfaction in knowing I had been right. Peter excused himself to make some important calls, giving my daughters, Jod, and me time to catch up. Jod found pictures of me from when we first met, and both daughters admitted they wouldn't have recognized me. When Peter returned, everyone fell silent. Willa will be taken into custody after the holiday, Peter said. We can hold her for 48 hours before charging her with 3 counts of theft for stealing annuities from her children. We'll slow down the process so she won't get a bond hearing immediately. Dad, if you can fly in on Wednesday, rent a U-Haul, and visit some old places to get noticed, tell anyone who asks that you're here to pack Josie's things. This way, Willa will have to communicate from jail, Peter added. Jod asked, Peter, are you using my children's father as bait to lure out my cousins? What assurance do I have that he won't become a target? I looked at Jod, and she saw my determination. Damn, you'll do it without hesitation. No matter what, she said. Jod knew me better than I knew myself. Art has always been like that, Jod added. That's why we trust you. I made my way to the Grand Dame's house after leaving Bob and Betty's Burger Bar. The town was different, yet the same. The same weathered charm still hung in the air. But now there were new stories waiting to unfold. As I drove through familiar streets, memories of my time in paradise flooded back, making the weight of my past more tangible. Yet, I couldn't ignore the fact that things had changed. People had changed. I had barely set foot in the door when I was greeted by Josie, who was busy packing things. The air was tense, not only because of the major shifts about to take place, but because Josie seemed to be in the know. I watched her as she worked, realizing just how much she had done to keep everything together while I was gone. The truth was, no matter how much distance I had tried to put between myself and the past, it had a way of finding its way back. I've been keeping everything in place as best I can, Josie said, glancing at me with a quiet smile. But things are coming to a head. You know that, right? I nodded. Yeah, I know. It's only a matter of time before the whole thing unravels. She handed me a box filled with papers, old and new documents, detailing everything. The weight of the information wasn't lost on me. My former life and the lies they had woven around me were all in that box. My former wife, Willa, her sister Tammy, they thought they could keep pulling the strings, but they underestimated the one thing they never expected: my return. I needed to do this for my children, for everything I had lost, and for the price I had to pay to protect them. Moving everything out of the old house felt like finally clearing the last remnants of my life there. You know, when I left, I didn't think I'd ever return, I said, as Josie handed me a few more papers, some dated and some with recent stamps. But now it feels like coming full circle. Full circle, Josie echoed. You're right. But remember, this full circle comes with consequences. You're back now for a reason, and things will get worse before they get better. I let out a breath. Josie had always had a way of saying things with quiet certainty. I knew she was right. The storm was about to hit, and everything I had worked for, everything I had fought for, was about to be tested. But one thing was clear. I was done hiding. This time, they would see that I had the strength to not only fight back, but win. It wasn't long before I received a call from Peter. He informed me that Willa's arrest was only the beginning. There was more to uncover about my former lawyer's sudden passing. The investigation had uncovered connections that would shake the town to its core. Things are moving quickly now, Peter said, and you're about to be the key to it all. The pieces were falling into place, and as I stood in the Grand Dame's house, I knew that soon the entire truth would come out. It was only a matter of time before Willa and Tammy's web of lies was unraveled. And this time, I wouldn't be the one caught in it. Brad stood frozen in the kitchen, the reality of his situation sinking in. He hadn't expected things to take such a turn. His entire life had been manipulated by Willa and Tammy, and now he was a pawn in their twisted game. The look on his face was one of disbelief as he processed my words. His jaw tightened, and his hands subconsciously gripped the tire iron, though it no longer seemed as much of a weapon as it once had. "I didn't know they'd go this far," Brad muttered, his voice shaky. "Of course you didn't," I replied coolly. "They've been using you all along, Brad. Just like they used me." I could see the gears turning in his head, the realization slowly dawning. He'd been a pawn in a much larger scheme, one that had nearly cost him his life, and he was too deep in it to walk away now. The tension in the room was palpable as he took a step back, the weight of the conversation pressing down on him. "Look, I don't know if you're going to make it out of this," I continued, not backing down. "But if you want any shot at a clean slate, you need to make the right choice now. You can't keep being manipulated by them. You've got a choice, Brad. Play their game and end up in prison, or help us take them down." Brad shook his head, his eyes scanning the room. It was clear he was struggling with what he'd just learned. For so long, he had been part of the plan, believing that his involvement would lead to something better. But now, facing the truth, it was all falling apart. The ties to Willa and Tammy were suffocating him. "How do I get out of this mess?" Brad asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "You can start by talking," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Tell me everything you know. Let's take them down before they get the chance to finish what they started." Brad didn't answer immediately. He took a deep breath, as if weighing the gravity of the situation. It wasn't easy to turn on the people who had pulled the strings of his life for so long. But deep down, he knew there was no other way out. "I can't promise I'll survive this," he finally said, his tone resigned. "But I'll do what I can. If you're really going to take them down, you're going to need every bit of information I can give you." I nodded, impressed by the change in him. For the first time in this entire mess, Brad was making the right decision. He wasn't completely out of the woods yet, but he was taking a stand, one that would ultimately help us all. As we talked through the details, it became clear that Willa and Tammy's plan was more complex and far-reaching than I had ever imagined. But now, armed with the truth, we were in a position to stop them before they could finish what they started. By the time the conversation ended, the silence in the room felt less heavy. I wasn't sure what the future held for any of us, but I knew one thing for sure. It was time to turn the tables. The game wasn't over yet. It was only just beginning. "Will finally get his justice?" Connie asked, her voice filled with a mix of disbelief and hope. Peter nodded slowly, his tired eyes reflecting the weight of the past few days. "Yes," he said, "your father's actions and everything that led up to this will finally come to light. Willa and Tammy, along with Brad, are facing serious charges. They'll be held accountable for everything they've done to him and to all of you." The weight of his words settled over the table, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I might finally have the peace I'd been searching for. My past had been a tangled web of lies, manipulation, and betrayal, and now, after everything, it seemed justice was finally within reach. I looked around at my family, Jod, my daughters, my parents, and saw the relief in their faces. They had been part of this journey, supporting me through the worst of it, and now, it seemed we could finally breathe easy. For years, I had wondered if I'd ever be able to move on, if I'd ever be free from the grip of my past. But today, it felt like a new chapter was about to begin. "We've been through so much," Jod whispered, taking my hand under the table. "But it's over now. It's really over." I squeezed her hand in response, feeling a wave of gratitude wash over me. The road to this moment had been long and painful, but it had brought me here, safe, surrounded by those who cared about me, and with the truth finally coming to light. No more lies. No more manipulation. The rest of the breakfast passed in a comfortable silence, with everyone sharing stories and enjoying each other's company. For the first time in what felt like forever, there was no tension, no fear of what was coming next. For once, I could simply enjoy the moment. After we finished, Peter stood up, signaling that it was time to go. "I'll keep you updated, Art. We've got a few more things to handle, but we're getting close." I nodded, knowing there was still work to be done. But for the first time in years, I felt hopeful about the future. As Peter left with Connie, Jod and I lingered a bit longer, savoring the calm that had finally settled over us. The kids were laughing, playing with their grandparents, and for the first time in so long, it felt like everything was exactly where it needed to be. Do you think things will ever go back to normal? Jod asked, her eyes filled with curiosity. I smiled, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. I don't know, I said softly, but I think we're on the right path. And that's enough for me. For the first time, I allowed myself to believe that the past didn't have to define me anymore. The darkness was behind me, and I could finally move forward into a future I could create. The weight of betrayal was lifting, and in its place was a sense of freedom I hadn't felt in years. The journey was far from over, but I was no longer afraid of what lay ahead. I looked at Jod, a sense of deep fulfillment filling my chest as I processed what had just unfolded. I can finally get married, she asked, her voice tentative, trying to fully grasp the reality of the situation. Peter, always the calm presence, nodded. Yes, the DA took the papers to the judge along with your dad's original divorce papers, he explained. The judge, now fully informed, will likely waive Willa's signature requirement, bypass the waiting period, and issue the divorce certificate. It was surreal to hear it. After everything, I was finally free from the shackles of my past. I think I'd better buy you a proper engagement ring today and finally propose, I said, a smile creeping onto my face. The room was quiet for a moment before everyone murmured in approval. Jod's eyes welled up with tears. She had always believed that we would get here, but I could tell this moment took her by surprise. Before we left, Mom and Dad insisted we come over for dinner. We spent the afternoon packing, and by 5:30 p.m., we were heading to their house. Dinner with Mom and Dad was full of questions, and Jod spoke about everything. The challenges she faced and how her grandmother had helped her escape a failed marriage. She even shared how she'd found her first job and how it all led to where we were now. We were still enjoying their company when Peter and Connie arrived, bringing with them my divorce certificate. It was hard to believe, but I was officially free. Over dinner, Jod bragged about our life together, our children, and our new beginning. Mom smiled and said, "You should have a wedding before you both leave again." That was when Dad pulled Peter aside, grabbing 2 fresh beers, signaling us to follow him to the den. We couldn't get a word in edgewise before word spread that Tammy had been arrested, and people started calling with more information. The DA's office had to assign extra staff just to help us sort through the avalanche of news. It seemed that what we knew was only the tip of the iceberg when it came to what Tammy and Willa had been up to. What's going to happen to Willa's common-law husband? I asked, curiosity getting the better of me. Peter shook his head. He'll probably be disbarred, but there's no proof linking him to anything with the witches. He'll be involved in raising their children, but he's not tied into this mess. Sasha, sitting nearby, asked, "Has anyone notified Aunt Josie?" I nodded. Jod's dad wears a size 6.5 ring in case you were wondering, I added with a grin, lightening the mood. A few minutes later, Peter and I were off to the mall, where he helped Connie pick out a ring set she liked, while I found a beautiful 3-ring engagement set for Jod. When we returned, we were pleased to find that no one had noticed we'd left. I was talking to Josie when Karen and her boyfriend showed up. The house was bustling, and we all moved into the living room. Dad made sure Jod sat in his chair, which didn't go unnoticed by Mom, who kept a sharp eye on everything. There was a brief silence before I walked over, knelt down, and asked Jod to legally become my wife. "Are you serious?" she asked, her voice trembling as the moment took her by surprise. "Of course," I said, my voice steady. The party continued, and Dad grinned. "This is the best way to start, Art." Peter drove Jod and me to Josie's house after a long day. We were finally able to breathe again. On Friday, we went to City Hall to pick up our marriage license. Jod was thrilled when she tried on Connie's wedding dress and found that it fit perfectly. Jack agreed to be my best man, and Karen became Jod's maid of honor. The DA even agreed to perform the ceremony. I had to buy a suit, of course. Jod wasn't letting me marry her in jeans. On Sunday afternoon, surrounded by the entire family in my parents' backyard, Jod and I exchanged vows. My former father-in-law handed me an envelope, saying, "This isn't a wedding gift. It's your early inheritance." I slipped the envelope into my suit pocket, not thinking much of it as we enjoyed the rest of the day. Later, Jod and I spoke about our honeymoon plans. After everything, we agreed that once Josie was settled into her new home, we'd spend a week in Florida and then a week in California, taking the kids to Disney. We wanted a fresh start, and this was just the beginning. The next day, I handed Jade an envelope containing a bank promissory note for $100,000. It was a token of my gratitude for everything she had done for me, for fixing the chaos caused by my past. I had always suspected the twins' actions, but now I was finally able to see it all clearly. The envelope went into her purse without a word, and we climbed into the U-Haul and drove home. We were free of the past, and we could finally build our future. What would you do if you discovered that the people you trusted the most had been hiding the truth for years? In this gripping tale of betrayal and revenge, a man is forced to confront the painful past he's tried to leave behind when his ex-wife's manipulative schemes come to light. How far would you go to protect your family and reclaim your life? Is there ever really an escape from toxic relationships, or does the past always come back to haunt you? With hidden agendas, hidden alliances, and unexpected twists, this story raises the ultimate question. Can you truly start over, or are you forever tied to the actions of those who betrayed you? What do you think? Does the truth ever truly set you free?